नमो ब्रह्मादिभ्यो ब्रह्मविद्या संप्रदायकर्तृभ्यो वंश ऋषिभ्यो महद्भ्यो नमो गुरुभ्यः। सर्वोपप्लवरहितः प्रज्ञानघनः प्रत्यगर्थो ब्रह्मैवाहमस्मि ब्रह्मैवाहमस्मि। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। ॐ ईशावास्यमिदं सर्वं यत्किञ्च जगत्यां जगत् तेन त्यक्तेन भुञ्जीथा मा गृधः कस्य स्विद्धनं कुर्वन्नेवेह कर्माणि जिजीविषेच्छतं समाः। एवं त्वयि नान्यथेतोऽस्ति न कर्म लिप्यते नरे। असुर्यानाम ते लोका अन्धेन तमसा वृताः तांस्ते प्रेत्याभिगच्छन्ति ये के चात्महनो जनाः। अनेजदेकं मनसो जवीयो नैनद्देवा आप्नुवन् पूर्वमर्षत् तद्धावतोऽन्यानत्येति तिष्ठत् तस्मिन्नपो मातरिष्वा दधाति। तदेजति तन्नैजति तद्दूरे तद्वन्तिके तदन्तरस्य सर्वस्य तदु सर्वस्यास्य बाह्यतः यस्तु सर्वाणि भूतानि आत्मन्नेवानुपश्यति सर्वभूतेषु चात्मानं ततो न विजुगुप्सते। यस्मिन् सर्वाणि भूतानि आत्मैवाभूद्विजानतः तत्र को मोहः कः शोक एकत्वमनुपश्यतः। सपर्यगाच्छुक्रमकायमव्रणम् अस्नाविरं शुद्धमपापविद्धं कविर्मनीषी परिभूः स्वयंभूर्याथा तथ्यतोऽर्थान् व्यदधाच्छाश्वतीभ्यः समाभ्यः। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। So this 8th mantra, in which the last few words, which I touched upon in my previous class, but still would like to discuss it a little bit further. Yadha tathyato arthan vyadadhat shashvatibhyah samabhyah, which means this mantra is about consciousness And this last portion of the mantra speaks about this consciousness being the entity which distributes, which allots the functions to the various prajapatis. The word sama has been used here, which has been explained by Shankaracharya as prajapati. Why he explains it in that way, that's a technical discussion, and I'm really leaving out all the technical discussions from my discourses here, which we study when we study these texts. So Prajapati means an entity which protects and nourishes the creation. Praja means the creation, all this including our own selves. And Pati means, it is derived from the root pa, which means to protect, to nourish. So all these entities which are constantly functioning, constantly active in this universe, may it be the sun, the moon, the stars, the earth, the rivers, everything that makes our existence possible, they function within their own limits. They constantly execute their own duty on a very regular basis. The sun rises on time, sets on time. And like this, everything is functioning. So what is the entity which allots these functions to all these prajapatis, as they are called, the word sama which has been used here? It is this consciousness. This is what this last portion of this mantra is talking about. So with this we really get to the idea of God, which is something that I discussed briefly in the very beginning when we studied the first mantra, Ishavasya midam sarvam. Let the divine, let that universal principle, let that Ishvara, but Ishvara, the idea of supreme ruler is present, because Ish means ruler and Ishvara means supreme ruler. So the idea, it very specifically, it refers to the idea of God. And back then I explained that ultimately consciousness is the ruler. Everything that happens within our body, consciousness rules over that, everything. So when we speak of that consciousness as a ruler, we are referring to it as God. So this takes us, this really, to go further from here particularly, I would have to discuss a little bit also the theological understanding of the Vedas, which I want to do today, which really gives us a background understanding, because the following discussions, which are about the importance of performing rituals without understanding, the next mantra, which says that somebody who andham tamah pravishanti ya vidyam upasate, those who perform, those who are complete, those enter darkness who follow ignorance. And here specifically the word ignorance stands for performing. Again, a mantra can have various meanings. This is just one of the meaning of this mantra, in which it means that somebody who performs rituals without understanding their significance, their meaning, indeed enters darkness, but someone who does not perform them and only directly goes into vidya, into knowledge, into meditation, into the meditative approach, he enters even deeper darkness. And therefore, a combination of both, the importance of both, has been pointed out here. But to understand the whole idea and why this is important, we have to look a little bit at the theological understanding of the Upanishads. First of all, when we talk about the idea of God in the Upanishads, which means God as an entity which creates, which organizes, and which destroys. Sometimes some masters have come up with this funny explanation of each letter of the word God: G for generator, O for organizer, and D for destroyer. And this is also the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Brahma, which means the creator principle, and Vishnu, which means the organizing principle, and Rudra, Shiva, the destructive principle. But ultimately, they are manifestations of the same entity, not different from each other. So, the idea of such a creator is seen more as a tool to raise one's awareness and then even transcend that. Because even that idea of God is seen as a limited concept. But I will not get into that today. I really just want to discuss the other theological ideas that are there. But in this context, when we look at Indian ancient Vedic theology, we have to understand that it arises out of what today the modern historians and the modern anthropologists refer to as the Proto-Indo-European religion. Many of its that is the reason many of its gods, if we can call them gods, they are found throughout the different cultures. Wherever this Proto-Indo-European language reached, and along the language also the ideas reached in different parts of the world. As far as Northern Europe, Latvia, Lithuania, all these Northern European countries, and as far as Britain, wherever, because today we know that around more than 3 billion people, which is half the population of the earth, talks a language which belongs to the Indo-European family. So as these languages spread all over the world, with that also initially these ideas spread. Whether they had their origins in India or somewhere else, that depends on who we listen to, who we look at. That again is something that I don't want to get into. But the Vedic religion, the Vedic theology, develops the idea from worshipping many into meditation on one, and then ultimately experiencing the supreme oneness in which there is no object of meditation, there is no object of worship, but there is just a pure being. So these are the very clearly definable 3 steps. The first step of a ritualist, who performs rituals dedicated to many different manifestations. Then the approach of a meditator, somebody who meditates, where the whole purpose is to draw back our awareness from many and focus it on one, what Patanjali calls ekatattva abhyasa, practice to focus the mind on one essence, and then, but still it is an object. So then the final step is to break this division between the subject and the object altogether, in which that is the level of the mystic. So the purely ritualistic level, the meditative level, these would be the two levels of what we understand as religion, and then the third level would be the deeper level of religion, which we generally refer to by the word mysticism, but unfortunately the word mysticism also has all these ideas, of future telling and all that with which it has nothing to do. So I prefer the word that Aldous Huxley used in his book, The Perennial Philosophy, where he uses the word autology, the science of the self. And that is because auto is basically the English equivalent of the word Atman, which the Upanishads are about, which the mystical teachings are about. So rather than this attempt happened in other cultures also, we know. That is how Islam came into existence. It was as a struggle against the worship of many. And the Prophet literally went out and demolished the idols that were there in Kaaba. And he ordered various temples to be demolished throughout Saudi Arabia. So rather than taking that approach, the Vedic rishis, they see these three stages through which a human being in his life, as he evolves, has to pass and has to evolve into the final stage. And therefore, for them, it was of no significance that a person should literally go out and, even though they emphasized so much on that non-duality, on that oneness, never ever anybody thought of literally going out and eradicating people of other beliefs or that sort of thing. Did not happen here. So let me discuss Vedic theology in this context. The first thing that a person, when they come to India, they hear about these 33 million gods, which is the most wrong it can really get, because they are not actually, they don't even know that million is not the equivalent of crore. It's 330 million specifically. Not 33 million, but 330 million. However, the Sanskrit word koti, which means crore, also means categories. Like the word category, koti. Koti is category, grades. So, ultimately, the Vedas, they always speak only of 33 divinities that are evoked, that are worshipped through the various kinds of fire rituals. So I will look at them because they are either principles out there or principles within us or principles in time. So that is where the whole story actually develops. Should they be called gods or not? In Sanskrit, they are called devas. However, the word God, which is again, it's a Proto-Indo-European word and it has cognates in Sanskrit, the Sanskrit root hu, which is used in the Vedas, huta, puruhuta, ahuti, ahuti. Hu, that root hu, which means to pour, to offer sacrifices. So the word huta means the entity to which we sacrifice. What is worshipped by that pouring of ghee or whatever, into the fire. That entity would be called huta. And the word puruhuta has actually frequently been used in the Vedas, which means worshipped by many, or called upon, invoked by many. So this word puruhuta, the word huta or huta is deeply related with, if you look at, and this is not something that I'm making up, you can look at any Oxford dictionary. Ultimately, it is derived from here, from the root hu. Interestingly, this I find interesting. I'm not saying that there is any similarity, but I just find interesting that the other word, which is very central to at least two Abrahamic Semitic religions, Judaism and Christianity, the word Yahweh is also frequently used in the Rig Veda for the supreme divinity. Vrisha Vrishne Duduhe Duhasa Divah Payamsi Yahweh Adite Radabhya. And in the Vedas, it is derived from the root. I know the meaning, of course, in a Judaic context is slightly different, but here it means that entity which is being worshipped. It is derived from the root yaj, from which the word yajna, worship, is derived. So like this, there are some interesting similarities that are there. The entity in which devotees take refuge, that is how the word Yahweh has been explained by 6th century BC masters of India. So, however, the most common word that we use is the word Deva. And Deva has its cognate in Western, in theology, theos. This word theos itself is related to the word Deva, which in Sanskrit means anything that gives, which includes giving life, because that is how the masters, the Vedic masters, Maharshi Yaska, again 6th century BC, he explains, Deva is an entity which danat, which gives, or the second meaning is Dyotanat, which enlightens, or the third meaning is an entity which exists in the realm of light. So these are the three meanings that have been given to the word Deva. And therefore the word Deva has such a wide application that even the senses, these senses with which we enlighten the external world, they are also called Deva. We saw that, those who were here, when we were studying the fourth mantra, Nainat Deva Apnuvan Purva Marshat, the senses did not reach it. There the word for the senses, which has been used in Sanskrit, is Deva. So anything, even a wise man, sometimes is referred to by the word Deva. So Deva simply means anything that is radiant. Therefore, I usually translate it into English. My preferred translation is radiant beings. Anything that emits light, anything that enlightens, that is a Deva. It is related to the root div, which means to enlighten. Now, when the Vedas, they speak of these 33 Devas, what are they? They are, first of all, the first group out of these 33 consists of the 8 Vasus. Vasu is derived from the word vas, which means to live. So the entities which enable us to live in this world, they are known as the 8 Vasus. So that is Agni, fire, Prithvi, earth, Vayu, wind, Antariksha, space, Aditya, the sun, Dew, the visible realm of light, and the individual stars. So these 8 together, they are known as Vasu. And why they are called Vasu? Because everything exists in them, everything lives in them, and they make the living of everything possible. So this is the first group, the 8 Vasus, as they are known is in the Vedas. I'm just talking about these things because they are a little bit important for the next mantras that we are about to study, that will give us the capacity to appreciate in which context the teachings are coming. And it is also the ancient Indian life in which all the different traditions, even Buddhism, Jainism, Buddhism also, even today, as far as Japan, as in Japan, Shangon Buddhism practices Agnihotra, fire worship, and when they practice fire worship, like people in India, they also invoke the same devas. The Buddha speaks about them. They are in the Buddha's teachings. Similarly, Jainism, the other form of religion in India, also speaks about them. They are really universal in that sense. And in the ancient world, we really see that they are found everywhere. So these are the first group of 8, which are devas in the universe out there. They are part of the macrocosmic reality, which make existence possible. That is the first group. The second group, and everything that I'm speaking about is from the Upanishads themselves. Not making up anything. It is from Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, the last Upanishad, which is like an explanation to this Upanishad, and which is quite a detailed, actually one of the biggest, most detailed Upanishads, which were composed latest 6th century BC, before 6th century BC. So all these ideas are certainly more ancient than 2,500, up to 3,000 minimum. More than that. So then the second group is the 11 Rudras. The 11 Rudras. If you go, for example, to Kathmandu, in front of Pashupatinath, you will see 11 temples of Lord Shiva. So they are representative of the 11 Rudras. But what do these 11 Rudras really symbolize? For that we have to come to the Upanishads. And there Maharshi Yagyavalkya in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, he explains that these 11 Rudras are nothing but the 10 senses within our body, the 5 senses of perception, the 5 senses of action, and the 11th is the mind, the faculty with which we operate these 5 senses of perception and 5 senses of action. And why they are called Rudra? He explains because when they leave, they make everybody to weep. The word Rudra is derived from the root Rud, which means Rodana, to weep. This is his explanation, Maharshi Yajnavalkya's explanation. So these are what we can call the macrocosmic devas, the macrocosmic principles that are present within the body. And now, when a person transcended the initial ritualistic level and was going deeper into the meditative level, we see how there are so many meditative techniques that make the meditator aware of a microcosmic entity within the body as one and the same, or just a manifestation of a macrocosmic entity out there. So what is, for example, Surya, the sun, out there is the eyes, the capacity to see within me. Or what is wind out there is prana or ghrana, this breathing in and breathing out, prana and apana. Apana, which is the downward flow, in breath, and prana, which is the upward flow, which means exhalation, inhalation and exhalation. They are nothing but just an internal manifestation of the principle that is out there. So in this way, a person became aware that what is out there also actually manifests within me as these various principles. So a kind of union, a kind of understanding of this union was already happening there through these meditations. So this is what we find in the Aranyaka texts, which I have referred to very often. And I think similarities to this I have very clearly seen, for example, in Taoism, where the interior of the body is considered to be inhabited by the same gods that exist in macrocosm. Taoism really develops this idea. And it's beautiful to look at it there, because that gives us a sense of how the Vedic masters were developing the idea as well. So these were the two kinds of devas that exist in space. You can call them the spatial devas, those that existed in space, in the space outside and in the space within. And then the third group, which was known as the 12 Adityas. The 12 Adityas, they were in number 12, they belong to the temporal group, which are active within the time. So the 12 Adityas are nothing but the 12 months of the year, or in other words, the 12 forms of the sun, which is again every month slightly different. So these are the 12 Adityas. So 8 plus 11 makes it 19. 19 and 12 makes it 31. So we have already got 31. And then the next one, Maharshi Yajnavalkya there states, is Indra. And Indra has been explained in the Upanishads within as the seer, the entity which sees everything. It is related to the word idandra. Idam means this, and dra means to see. So Indra means the entity to see. So that the seer within, the individual seer within, and the last one, according to him, is Prajapati, which he explains as the principle of sacrifice, which can be understood that to create energy, one always has to sacrifice something. Then it gets transformed, and this happens on every level. This principle is active on every level. It is active in the stars, it is active in our cells. Constantly something has to be fed into them, something has to be sacrificed for energy, for life, for creation to come out of it. So that is the principle of yajna, which is a very wide principle. Even pranayama is considered a form of yajna. Various yogic practices are considered a form of yajna. So these are more or less that the 33, when the Vedas, when they speak of the 33 devas, they mean these 33 entities. And we can see, for example, now Indra, the 32nd one, which I spoke about, for the ancient Greek it was Zeus, Pater. For the Romans it was Jupiter. For in Norse mythology he was known as Thor. So we can see that how these ideas traveled, but what happened in India was these ideas were later on developed into the direction of creating. They were considered as means, as methods to train human consciousness First of all, to get rid, because again, that is how, corresponding to that, the Vedic life has again 3 stages. The first stage is in which a person gets rid of the bad activities by performing good activities as the first step. And then the second step is, once a person has started performing good activities, then start performing them selflessly, without any selfish purpose. That is the second step. And the third step is the step of realization. So these 3 steps correspond accordingly nicely to this. So that is what overall the idea of the Vedic method, that as long as it comes to active worship, a manifestation, a form is chosen, just one. It's not, when sometimes people think that we worship many gods, it means we worship many gods together. It's always one particular group of people worships one entity. And because they were living all together in India, different groups focused their worship, their attention on a different entity. And they were mutually respectful of each other and accepted them also as valid paths. So here, the direction that this mantra is taking us to is that all these different 33 entities that are constantly active, when he speaks of the Prajapatis, when he speaks of the principles that are constantly active without our any kind of conscious control over them, everything is fully functioning. And it is there, we may appreciate it, we may not appreciate it, but we completely depend. Even when the earth just slightly moves, what happens? Just slightly, for a few microseconds. When it ceases being stable the way it usually is, see what happens. See, the moment the water crosses its limit, even just a little bit, just a few hundred meters, what happens? Thousands and thousands of people get killed. This is the power that lies in these entities. One can completely negate them and say, I have nothing to do. Or one can use them as objects of meditation, as tools to evolve one's awareness. This is the idea that has led to the ultimate awareness that we see in the Upanishads. The Upanishads are really the pinnacle, but it starts from there. The very ground, the very source of development, the very first step of development starts from there, and then it ultimately leads us to the highest wisdom, to the highest realization of the Upanishads. So here, what in this part of the mantra, what Maharshi Dadhyang Atharvana is saying, Yatha Tathyatu Arthan Vyadadha Chashvatibhya Samabhya, each one of these which are fully active within their own limits and are constantly working, constantly at work, and it is their activity, it is their work. We think the ground is very still. This is an imagination. Today we know these tectonic plates, how they are created and then again merge back into the center of this earth. This earth is a highly active, fully alive planet. What we see as rocks, these are just part of the process. But it is fully active, like the sun is active. Everything is active. And it is that movement, that action, which makes life possible. Our life is nothing, but it is just an outcome of constant action in the environment around us and within the body. Each and every cell, each and every organ is constantly active. Even the moments of sleep, which I think it was the first Patanjali who realized that sleep is no fluctuation of mind. The mind is highly active, even to give us the experience of deep sleep. And today, the study of deep sleep, the study of brain waves in deep sleep, reveals that how active the mind has to be to give us the experience of deep sleep and complete relaxation. There is nothing like lack of activity. This is just not possible. Life cannot exist. Life depends on the principle of action, on the principle of karma. So it is ultimately appreciating that principle that is active in so many different forms, first of all, by analyzing each and every form and then seeing the underlying unity, not breaking the form, but seeing the underlying unity which from within supports all these different manifestations, and in this way reaching to that oneness, reaching to that monotheistic approach with complete understanding. This is how the Vedic theology develops. And so this mantra that he says, Yatha Tathyatu Arthan Vyadadhat Shashvatibhyah Samabhyah, this Shashvatibhyah Samabhyah, which are Shashwati means eternal. They are there since time eternity, and they will fully function like this for a very, very long time. Our life period is less than a fraction of a second compared to their life times. And they are constantly active. But it is ultimately this principle of consciousness which allots the work to each one of these entities. So by this, now, Maharshi Dadhyanga Atharvana has come to a stage, because the place of Ishavasya Upanishad is the 40th chapter of the Shukla Yajurveda, where a lot of rituals have taken place. It follows the life of a king. First of all, he is coronated as a king. Then the rituals in which he gives up his animal tendencies take place. Then the rituals in which he gives up all the human diversity takes place. After which he was supposed to give back all his wealth away to the poor people. And then when he goes into the forests, that is when the moment of Ishavasya Upanishad, the moment of these teachings came. So there, this awareness that till now, all the entities that you were worshipping to create, to transcend your animal instinct, to transcend the human diversity as well, which you used, realize that they are manifestations of that one single consciousness. This is what he's making aware of in this mantra. And from now, of course, a question can easily arise. That now the same confusion comes. Should I follow this or should I follow that? What is the need of uninformed ritualism in the whole context? Should we completely get rid of it or leave it for them who require it, who still have not evolved to this level of understanding? His view to that is that we require both. The first is required to transcend one's animal tendencies, and the second is required, which means the first ritualistic approach is required to transcend our animal tendencies, and the second meditative approach is required to go deeper and reach the inner essence. So in other words, what he is doing, he is giving both action and meditation. He is giving these both principles their due importance. He's even, because usually what happens that first of all a person is very active and then they start becoming very passive in meditation and then they forget the importance of action. So in a way, he's even giving more importance to action, to work, which we already saw in the second mantra when he said that if you want to live a life of 100 years, then you should do it only by constantly working. So again, the same idea that we find in the Bhagavad Gita, in which Sri Krishna tries to bring a balance between action and between contemplation, between meditation, when he points out that don't think that the inactive state can be acquired by not acting. In the 3rd chapter, Nakarmana manarambhat naishkarmyam purushoshnati. A person does not reach naishkarmya, the state of inactivity, by not performing actions. Because the moment we start speaking of that trans-active state, the deep inner state, people think action is not important. So this balance, which is something that is why Buddha went a little bit into a different direction initially. Because Buddha's complete focus was only on meditation. Yet you see, also they could not get rid of rituals. Ultimately, all those rituals came back into Buddhism in different forms, but is Buddhism free from all rituals? Yet the Buddha was not interested in all these rituals. On the contrary, because his approach was completely meditative. Yet, again, because they are a need, they are a human need, they are part of the process of development. And then again, most of the rituals that went into Buddhism, they are all, most of them, they are Vedic rituals. As I pointed out earlier, that even in Japan, these rituals exist today. The Buddhist monks, they have exactly the same rituals that we have in India. Agnihotra, same. We call it Homa, they call it Goma. Just that's the difference. We call it Homa, they call it Goma. That's all. So, both is important. But however, as a yoga practitioner, how much ritual do we have? A little bit in the beginning when we pray to Sage Patanjali, which is for us as a manifestation of that primordial supreme master, which is present within every entity. That is what Patanjali stands for. So we have this small little ritual which we have every day. You can call it a small meditation. We all sit together, pronounce it. Why do we do it? So that much gets explained, and then of course in the wider context, it tells us about the importance of the work that we put into our yoga practice. That is how we have to relate with the teachings that are about to come. Today's purpose was simply to give a cultural context which has a very wide application because, as I again pointed out, that there are tremendous similarities between the mythological stories and characters of all around the world. When I was in Israel, I came across this book on the Canaanite gods and goddesses, and I could really see the similarity that is there with the Vedic traits that are there. The same is with Greek mythology. The same is with Roman mythology. The same is with the Celts, to whom the Druids belonged, and then Norse mythology. To me, all those different forms of mythology interest, and of course, I'm interested in them because I'm interested in psychology as a student of C.G. Jung. That is one reason why I'm interested. And the second reason is this, because it points to a common source, which can be seen from so many different facts. For example, the fact that swasti has been found archaeologically throughout the world, it again points to the same effect. So these were widely spread ideas. Somewhere they were negated, somewhere they were developed further. India was a country where these ideas, these ancient ideas, were not negated, they were not suppressed, they were not destroyed, but it was a whole understanding, this deep understanding of the Upanishads, this mystical understanding was developed over that, if we can say that. So, any thoughts? Anything that you would like from your own cultural background that would relate to this, or your own thoughts? Ashtavasu, always 8. Always 8. The Vasus are always 8. Ashtavasus, Ekadasha Rudras and Dvadasha Adityas. Always. Nobody. Either I was too clear or I was too obscure. I think rather the second. I was too, yes.
I don't understand what does it mean, sacrifice. For me, it somehow has a bad connotation of giving up of something. Maybe I don't understand sacrifice. Maybe I don't understand the word in English.
Something has to be produced. Something has to be destroyed for something new to be produced. The very fact of transformation depends on sacrifice. Something cannot be transformed. You have to sacrifice your milk to get curd. You cannot have curd without sacrificing milk. You cannot have both. You cannot have curd and milk. So that is the idea of sacrifice. What the Buddhists have presented in this sutra, nanupamridya pradurbhavat, unless something does not dissolve, something new cannot be created. Na anupamridya. Something completely gets dissolved. We have a beautiful saying in Urdu, ke dana khak mein milkar gule gulzar hota hai. A seed, only after getting completely destroyed in the soil, it becomes a beautiful flower. So that lies behind the idea of sacrifice. When we speak of sacrifice, this is what we mean. So, yes, because there is. I mean, yeah. Well, I'm not talking about that. Yes, even when a person draws back the senses, they are actually sacrificing the senses into the prana. And therefore, pranayama, pratyahara, is also seen as a form of yajna, as a form of sacrifice. So nothing, we have to sacrifice time, we have to sacrifice our interests, we have to sacrifice our effort, we have to sacrifice so many things to achieve something. It comes back to human endeavor, conscious endeavor. When we try to achieve something, then we have to sacrifice something. So that principle of sacrifice, and as I said, it is active everywhere. If such sacrifice would not be taking place at the heart of a star, we would have had no sun. The principle of sacrifice is constantly active there, yes?
I also have one question with understanding this unchanging entity, what never changes. Can I translate it in my language with soul?
Seele.
Seele?
Yeah. The problem with Seele is, the problem with soul is that at least in the Western context, it is in relation to that. It comes from the Platonic idea of the soul as something that lives in the world of the ideas, in the ideal world, and that that then comes from there and then wakes up in the human body and then remembers those impressions and therefore recognizes the deeper forms, So that idea of the soul and from where the Christian and the Islamic idea, because they were, in a sense, they were deeply influenced by Platonic and Aristotelian ideas, the idea of the soul as an entity created by God that comes at the moment of birth, or if, depending upon what religion you believe, 1 month or 2 months or 45 days or whatever, it enters the womb of the mother and the child becomes a living entity. So that idea of soul, which is there in all these different religions, that certainly by far does not correspond to the idea of Atman, which is more like a field of modern science. The field, like the electrical field, which is just simply present everywhere. There is nothing like going, coming, because there is nowhere where it is not. Everything is within it, and it is within everything. It is that consciousness. It is not something that can come somewhere and go somewhere and this and that. For that, the similar idea that we have in the Upanishads, that is Sukshma Sharira, the subtle body, which I have a few times explained. It consists of the 17, 18, or 19 elements, depending on how you count it, the 5 senses of perception, the 5 senses of action, the 5 pranas, this continuous stream of thought, faculty of understanding, buddhi, this notion of the self, and then eventually our memories. So these principles collectively, which are a form of energy, which is active within this body, that is known as the Sukshma Sharira in the Upanishadic understanding, and that would correspond closer to the idea of soul in Judaism, in at least in Christianity and Islam, the way I understand it. Then also it makes sense that it is a created entity, because again Sukshma Sharira, this subtle body, is not created at every birth, but it is created at the beginning of this complete cycle of creation. So it is still a created entity. So it beautifully actually corresponds to all the ideas that we have about the soul in the Western traditions. But soul cannot be the equivalent of Atman. The equivalent of Atman can only be self, can only be consciousness as an omnipresent entity. Yes? Second, the sacrifice.
Yeah, because in Judaism, in the days, the ancient time, they used to sacrifice animals in order to pay for the sins that human beings have. And I think this is why maybe it's considered to be like a negative thing, because you sacrifice someone else's life in order to clean yourself from your sins.
Yeah.
So I was kind of
Scapegoat. The scapegoat. Yes. Yeah.
Well, actually, if you could look at it, I guess that all of the religions in the area used to do it. It was kind of like a pagan.
It was happening in India. It happens even today in India, even though it is seen as the very lowest level of religious understanding.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, what we need to sacrifice is the animal within. The Sanskrit word for pashu, for animal, is pashu, and pashu is related to the word pasha, which means bondage. So something that is bound with the bondage of ignorance, that is called pashu. And that is need to be sacrificed within. And if the masters are sometimes speaking about sacrificing the animal within, if somebody reads it and because of that starts sacrificing an animal outside, then it means that they have a very primitive understanding. At least now I'm talking about the context here. And therefore, all the great masters, yes, in different parts, especially even in the Himalayas, in Nepal, in Bali, in Himachal Pradesh, in Garhwal, sacrifices happen. But whenever a wise master came, starting from Shankaracharya, the Buddha stood up against it. Shankaracharya stood up against it. All the great masters have again and again stood up against it and said that this is nonsensical. It doesn't make sense. What is meant is the sacrifice of the animal within, so that a person, first of all, can become what is the Sanskrit word for for human being, manushya, which means matva sivyati karmani, someone who executes his actions after carefully thinking. He is not guided by impulse. He's not guided by instincts, but he thinks. And that is what such a being, such an animal is called manushya, human being, an animal which is capable of thinking. Ultimately, the Sanskrit word pashu, animal, or jiva, which is again another word for jiva, jantu, these are used for human beings also. In the Vedic understanding, a human being, in a sense, from a physical point of view, is as much an animal like any other animal. There is no sense of superiority except this faculty of sadasad viveka, what is right and what is wrong, what is temporal and eternal. This capability to discriminate is what makes a human special. If that has not been developed, then there is no difference. Yes?
I get a little skeptical when I hear about sacrificing the animal within.
Yeah.
Because we're really the only species on this planet which the planet would be better.
I thought that this is going to come from you. I knew it's coming from you. That's going. Yes. No. Really. I mean, that's. I fully. Because as from your beautiful conservative, not conservative. No. Sorry. It means conservation. From your approach of conservation, is that the correct word? Yes, because the environment and that, and against the mass killing of animals for whales, and ultimately that's what humanity is doing. It is really destroying everything. So yes, against that, it's.
My interpretation of say hatha yoga, every asana is based upon.
Yes.
And with that there is a higher intelligence.
Yes. That is what the masters did. They literally learned from animals. If we look at Adi Guru Dattatreya, how much he learned by observing the bees, how much he learned by observing the serpents, by observing various birds, fish. He learned by observing. They were his masters. He called the fish his master. He called the honey bee his master. These were one of his 24 masters. So yes, the whole animal. That is why I in the very beginning I defined the word pashu as an entity which is in ignorance, which is guided by instinct alone, and has not the capacity to see what is right and wrong. However, even some advanced animals, and how much this is really applicable in reality to the animals out there, that is again questionable, because even they have a capacity to discriminate what is right and what is wrong, as long as their life depends on that to a very great extent. They are very wise. So many animals. Look at the dog, at the cows, how wise they are. So we can't just think this. And yes, so the other part of this, I was just talking of one part. The other part of Bali Vaishvadeva, in which the word Bali, the Sanskrit word for sacrifice, has actually been used in the Vedas. I discussed this once earlier also. That is in my talk on the Upanishads, that it is the 5 kinds of sacrifices that a person makes to the animals out there. Kaka Bali, Pipilika Bali, which means giving gifts to the crows, giving gifts to the ants, giving gifts to the cows, giving gifts to the dogs. And then if you look at the mantras that were pronounced, they were beautiful. They are beautiful mantras. The meaning is so beautiful. Be at peace. Be content. May there be no need to kill anyone else for you. For this, I'm giving you this food. So this was Bali Vaishwadeva was a practice that in ancient India every family used to do, and even till modern times. My grandmother usually used to send my father. It was a common practice in India, and it most probably still is, that in your first chapati always goes to the crow, to the cow. So this has been part of the Indian traditions very much. That is Bali Vaishwadeva. That is where the word Bali was actually used, which then later on started meaning to kill animals. That is how wrong sometimes religions can. When something goes to the masses, when yoga went to the masses, hashish yoga came out, beer yoga came out, funk yoga came out, all these forms of yoga came out because you have no control over all possible types of marijuana yoga, all those get stoned and then start doing yoga practices. This is happening, and these ideas are being literally promoted through websites, through newspaper articles, and they are getting popular. Now, what can you do? After a few hundred years, people would start blaming yoga. Say, this is what yoga was. It's happening as well. Exactly. So what can you do?
Just few days back, in Bangalore, 2 boys got sacrificed. Yes. A 7-year-old boy and a 9-year-old boy were sacrificed. And it's not in the last year, maybe last few years, more than 40 children were sacrificed.
That is why the spread of this wisdom needs to be done more with greater dedication. Otherwise, this ignorance will just remain. So something has to be done.
I think the video is really good that we were talking about it, or the video, it has so much power
Yes.
to get to everything with the negative things.
With the negative things as well, yes, they have them. So if a person becomes aware of the negative aspect, particularly that polarizing aspect of media, because even media is polarized, they have their own what the ancient masters of India used to call them pakshis. Pakshi means bird, and birds make a lot of noise, and it is also pakshi means bird. Because paksha means wing, and paksha also means side. So pakshi is someone who has taken a side, who has decided to be on one side. That I'm now on this. In this discussion, I'm on this side. And in that discussion, he's on that side. The moment you create these sides, the masters used to say, you become pakshis, like birds, which you can see, how they shout. And how they, in the forest, like these birds, when they come, or the crows, when they come on one tree, the noise that they make, that is the kind of noise a person starts making when they take sides.
So this is like in Israel, there was I think a year and a half ago, was a program, like the Big Brother program, but there was a very vegan activist there in that program, and it's like became like huge waves of awareness
Yeah.
to the animals and veganism, and much more people became vegan and or like consume less meat and less dairy products.
Yes.
And it was really affecting also the big companies.
The big
of that.
companies.
And that's amazing to run a program.
Yeah.
Because it's so much influence
Yeah.
on the whole country.
Yeah.
So that was sometimes, you think about the negative things
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
and the positive. And
I think everything beautiful, more or less, in the society has something negative and something positive. And the only way to, with understanding and with awareness, the kind of fear that, for example, media creates, the kind of divisions, if we become aware of that, we can be with the media, yet allow us not to get affected in a negative way. To get rid of media is, of course, it's unthinkable. It's unthinkable. We need it. This is the reality. So we have to make the best out of it. The time is over when the masters used to say, don't bring, for example, in Kailas Ashram or even Prabhuji or in various ashrams, people were not allowed to bring newspapers. Earlier, no newspapers allowed. This was a common thing in ashram. No newspapers were allowed. Otherwise, everybody is just talking about politics. Today, it's not possible. Today, you have it on your mobile phone, you have it on radio, on television, on every small little thing that you have is filled with that. So you cannot... No. Even in Kailas Ashram, it was in front of me that newspaper started to come. Before that. Even newspaper was not allowed. So you can't do that anymore. Yes, so...
And still we don't have TVs here. So when people say we should have TV here, that's
The smartphone is
in Takoli, Mataji, she does not want to have television. Newspaper she has. And internet she has. Okay. सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः. Thank you very much.